Welcome back as we continue our coverage of World Pork Expo here at the Iowa State Fairgrounds in Des Moines as things are off to a good start with good weather and a big crowd. They're expecting big crowds over 3 days, and again, as we mentioned earlier, 400 exhibitors, visitors from 38 countries. Indeed, it is a world event, a real showcase for the pork industry. One of the issues we have talked a lot about is the growing pressure being put on pork suppliers by companies like Safeway, Burger King, McDonald's, Kroger, wanting their pork to be supplied from cage-free, crate-free, if you will, operations, to move away from gestation stalls. We just talked about that with Ron Plain from the University of Missouri. Joining us now is Dallas Hockman, Vice President, Industry Relations for the National Pork Producers Council. Dallas, good to see you again. How does the pork industry respond to these pressures being put on by major companies, major users, retailers of pork?
Well, first of all, we need to recognize this is a very complex issue, one that we think that needs a lot of dialogue and discussion. Sadly enough, there's been very little discussion between those companies that's made these announcements and the pork supply chain. We, too, have a shared value that we need to start off first, is the fact that we do care about the animals. Our first and foremost priority is food safety and animal care. This is an issue that's being driven by activist groups and putting a pressure on these brands' decisions. And these decisions are being made without really having much discussion with the supply chain. One, the availability of the product, and two, the willingness of these companies to pay for it. And so we just, as you heard earlier from Dr. Plain, because they've been misinformed about the availability of the product. And one of their first steps is beginning to document how much product is available. Most importantly, there is no segregated product available out there today of any consequences that would even come anywhere near to meeting these demands that's been made. And so we're encouraging all of these groups and meeting with them to talk to them about these issues, the impact that they're having, most importantly on the economic viability of smaller producers, but as well as the ultimate impact that it's going to have on pork prices going forward.
As I've said, what really bothers me is these changes are being pushed without, as you said, the discussion about, is it necessarily the best direction or the right direction to go in? It's just being accepted because HSUS says it's better for the animals, and that perception has been created in people's minds, and companies look at it from a marketing standpoint. Hey, we can market it as, look, it's better for the animals, when that may not necessarily be true.
Well, that's exactly right. I mean, first of all, the argument is on where it's better for the animals. And there is no science to demonstrate by those especially that are peer-reviewed animal scientists, not interviews that take place with just consumers, that this is the right decision. But even given that they want to do that, then that's fine. Our producers have demonstrated over the years our willingness to step forward, whether it's niche market products such as Breed Specific, antibiotic-free product, ractopamine-free, Japan product. We're willing to do whatever the customer wants if they're willing to pay for it. But these unprecedented demands made by these companies, which is primarily market-driven, I mean, the fact of, they have no verification process to assure their customers that the product they're currently buying is meeting these. And that's our real challenge to them now. And more importantly, our demand to these is quit making these statements that just are not capable of the industry being able to meet.
And as you said, there will be a price to pay. There will be an increase in cost that will be eventually pushed to the consumers. And who usually bears the brunt of the blame for increased prices? Eventually someone's going to be saying, well, it's the farmer. And really, these are changes being pushed onto the producer that they're not wanting.
That's exactly right. This is about caregiver's choice. And again, we have producers who have chose to produce animals in different type of sow housing systems. But we only have to look. This is not about a fear-mongering. We only have to look at England and what took place 10 years ago when they implemented these same changes. And we saw nearly a 50% reduction in their number of producers that are viable today. We saw almost a 50% increase in their pork prices that they're paying, and a dramatic increase in the number of imports. So we can look very quickly at case examples. And at one time, England was the world-renowned place to go to find information about pork production. And today, they're a non-factor. And most of their product is imported. And so we need to learn from that and take point in that and look at these impacts that ultimately are going to lend itself at a time frame when we're facing record high pork or meat prices in general, and consumers are struggling to make sure that they can put protein on the table, that this is primarily being driven by an elitist agenda. For those who want to choose, Bob is saying it's kind of like, keep your values off my plate. You want to do that, that's great, and that's an opportunity that should be, but we shouldn't force it on all of the other consumers.
We're talking with Dallas Hockman, Vice President, Industry Relations for the National Pork Producers Council. When you have a large percentage of your population that really is far removed from the farm and from food production, they hear something that sounds good, and it sounds like this would be the best way to go. The animals can just wander freely and no restrictions and things like that. They don't hear the other side of it, why those stalls were used to protect the animals, from the fighting, for better control of feed and things like that. That seems to be lost in this whole discussion.
And that's exactly right. Today's consumers are far removed from where their food comes from, and so having a soundbite like all we're asking is the animal to be able to stand up and turn around, kind of resonates with them. It makes sense to them. It's such a complex issue here that they really don't have an appreciation. But let us not confuse the facts that say this is not an issue that's being driven by the consuming public. Study after study after study shows you this is not top of mind. First and foremost, consumers are concerned about food safety and the price of the product and availability. If pressed a long way down the chain, they will agree, yes, we want our animals taken care of, and so do we. So we have to do a better job of, for lack of better terms, marketing our story and getting out there. But the real issue right now is reaching those influencers who the pressure is being applied to on these brands and making sure that they have the confidence in today's supply chain that we're committed to doing the right thing. And yes, can we make improvements? Yes, we can, and we continue to demonstrate that. And yes, at times do we have some individuals who don't do the right thing? Yes, but we demonstrate the fact that we're willing to take care of those individuals, and steps are taken to assure that that don't happen again. But this is not about a consuming public. At a time frame when we're dealing with rural America challenges and economics and job losses, these impacts can potentially have significant impacts, especially on smaller producers who will bear the burden now of these fixed asset changes and gaining access to capital when it's a very difficult time.
I thought it was interesting in those numbers that Ron Plain had. There are producers using this open system. The key is producers who are the experts, along with their veterinarians, they will do what's best in their operation, works for the animals, works for them. That's the way it ought to be. That ought to be their choice.
That's exactly the case. We didn't arrive here overnight. This is 30 years of experience in production. We just didn't wake up one day and say, okay, let's put these animals in these stalls because we would like to be mean to them. We have found that it was the best thing for the animals to take care of them. Natural aggression occurs. And, oftentimes people reminisce about the good old days. Our animals today are taken better care of than ever before. They're in climate-controlled environments. They're fed a specific nutritional diet, clean water. And there was a point in time not that many years ago where I remember we were hoping at 13 pigs per sow. Today we're at 30. If these animals weren't taken care of, we wouldn't be having that type of performance. So this is about, caregiver's choice. And it's also, at the end of the day, if the consumers are wanting to purchase a product of that nature, we ought to offer it to them. But it ought to be their choice, and it ought to be our system's choice to produce it.
Yeah, somehow it's become okay for a group, and some outside group with an agenda like HSUS, to be the authority on how animals should be raised, rather than the producers themselves with their veterinarians, the experts in the field.
That's exactly right. And it's, at the end of the day here, we have to ask ourselves the simple question, who benefits because of this? Does it end up with safer product? Does it end up with more abundant product, cheaper product? No, none of that occurs. And who benefits is these companies or these activist groups like HSUS continuing to drive this agenda, applying pressure to the brands. And if we think this is the last discussion we're going to have about pressure being applied or production practices under attack, we're kidding ourselves. Again, we only have to look at what's taken place in England, that over time it's just one more step in the process of attacking modern agriculture and, most importantly, attacking food production in general of livestock.
Which is the goal of these activist groups. It's not about what's best for the animal. They have an end game here, which is to shut down production agriculture, especially animal agriculture.
That's exactly right. And we can look at a variety of statements that's been made by these groups or whatever, and we're very committed to animal care and continue to be that, and we too understand the importance of animal welfare as demonstrated by our producers' ability to continue to produce more product. And I say this time and time again, if our animals weren't taken care of, weren't fed, weren't looked after, we would not be the leading producer in the world for pork products.
Dallas, thank you very much. We'll be talking a lot more about this. I appreciate it.
Thank you again. Look forward to it. Hope everyone makes it down to the Expo.
Dallas Hockman, Vice President, Industry Relations for the National Pork Producers Council. When we come back, we're going to talk about keeping our food affordable. That's next from World Pork Expo on AgriTalk.